Yo, what up YouTube? Welcome back. Today we're doing something different. We're doing the top 5 cards from Dominaria United. I'm going to get you in, get you out, tell you what the best cards are so you know what to pick up. These cards will not be necessarily in order ranked from 1 to 5. This is because I'm rating them for standard and pioneer or historic, just in general. So like a card that is good in standard won't be good, could not be good in pioneer, right? Or historic or whatever. And I will talk about that as we just discuss the card. Before we jump into it, though, I want to say I will be streaming early access event on Wednesday over on twitch.tv/Aintrazi. Check me out. And also, if you want to see some gameplay of Magic, there's some here, and there's also some over on my personal YouTube channel, youtube.com/Aintrazi. Check that out as well. And one last thing, if you're gonna buy Magic cards, you're here at coolstuffinc.com. Support me, support Cool Stuff Inc. Use code Ollie5. Get a sweet Aintrazi with token. All right. Now, let's put on the nerd shades. Nerdy shades. Go ahead and start. So first up for white is we're going to talk about anointed peacekeeper. This card's 3 mana, 3/3, has vigilance, and when it comes into play, you look at the opponent's hand, you choose a card, and you get to then pick a name, and that card will cost 2 more, and that ability costs 2 more as well. So this will so on planeswalkers, it's kind of like a scuffed, at least spellbinder. It's not crazy. Is it playable? Yes. Is it exciting? No, not really. It will see play in standard. That's about it. It is nice against board wipes though, because you can play this and you can name something like, Meat Hook or Drag to the Bottom or whatever wrath there is. And even if it's not an opening hand, even if it's not a hand, if they draw it, it will cost more, right? So that is one good thing about it. But the drawbacks are it's not flying, right? It's vigilance, and when it dies, the card that you named is free reign again. So good enough for standard, but not really anywhere else. But it still makes top 5 for us. Next one, I think people aren't really look at this one too well, is Archangel of Wrath. This is a 4 mana 3/4 with flying and lifelink. Now, normally that wouldn't be enough. 4 mana 3/4. It's with flying lifelink. It's not quite there, but the ability to kick it for red or black and then shock something is powerful, because these shocks are also like a mini lightning helix, because what's happening is the creature itself is doing damage, and the creature having lifelink is huge. So like for 5 mana, if you're able to play this thing, kill something with 2 toughness, right? And then gain 2 life, and you have a 3/4 flyer. That's fantastic against small creature decks, or even finishing off like a planeswalker. And then later, if you have 6 mana, you can do it again, right? And even if you're playing like a white black deck, you don't have much red. This is still great, because we have triomes. You can play the Mardu one, or you can play and you have treasure. So it's pretty easy to get the other kicker ability, even if you're not in those colors. This card's great. I think it's fantastic for standard. I expect it to see plenty of play. I think it's very underrated. I think people looked over this card because I think it's kind of hard to evaluate the kicker ability. Next one is Temporary Lockdown. This is overall just a very good card. It's like Divine Purge and Alchemy. I feel like this is an answer to Historic, not Historic, to Lotus. It is a nice way to exile everything that costs 2 or less, obviously. Not really a main deck card unless you're in a very powerful format, maybe like Legacy, but even then it's not good enough. But in Modern or even Pioneer, having this in the sideboard and bringing it in, be able to exile everything is huge. So it's just a multi-Oblivion Ring, kind of a Wrath. It's a Wrath that also gets non-creatures too, right? So hitting like key artifacts or enchantments. So cool card, very powerful for the sideboard, but not necessarily main deck. This is my number one. I know I said we weren't going to use numbers. This is my number 1 pick for white. This card is really, really good. As a person that loves 5-color decks, I've played and made a lot of 5-color decks. I'm telling you, Leyline Binding is it. This is where you want to be. In formats of fetches and triomes, it's very easy to make this thing cost 1 mana on turn 2. In Historic or Pioneer, in Every Born, people are playing like Territorial Kavu, which is typically a 5/5 for 2. And this thing works really well with Enigmatic Incarnation because you can play it early, exile something, and then later in the game play Enigmatic Incarnation, sacrifice it, grab like Agent of Treachery, some 7-drop, Coma, Cosmos Serpent, Sarah's Emissary, just some absurd 7-drop very early in the game. And it also plays well with Yorion and dodges Prismatic Ending in Modern. Card is sweet, love it. I expect to see it in Standard too, and especially in more formats, it's going to be powerful. Like even in Standard, 1 Triumph, it's 3 mana, cast out, then it just upside from there. All right, this next one is a bit. I know people are like iffy on it or they like it, but it's a weird one, right? It's 5 mana. When it comes into play, you get to scry 4, and then you can reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature or planeswalker, you can put in your hand. Otherwise, it does nothing. Sorry, not a creature. It has to be a planeswalker. And for it to hit a planeswalker, though, your deck has to be pretty heavy with planeswalkers. And that might seem harsh, but like, what's cool about it is the next chapter it pays for itself, right? It says you may put a planeswalker from your hand that costs 6 or less. You can put into play. And the third chapter lets you use loyalty abilities twice. And you may be like, well, if I'm just going to play a planeswalker, why don't I just play a planeswalker instead of playing this card? Well, what's cool about this card is like a planeswalker is strongest when on an empty board for the most part, right? Especially for a control deck. So being able to like put in your Teferi or whatever planeswalker you want to put in, Kaya, or put it in, and then cast a board wipe, like a Doomscar or a Wrath Effect, and then have your planeswalker left over, that's pretty big. That's pretty huge, right? Because then you pass, and all of a sudden, like your opponent has nothing, and you have a planeswalker. That's a pretty big game. And then also it allows you to play. You can double up. You play two planeswalkers at once. But it's just being able to double spell that turn, like playing a 5-drop planeswalker and then still have access to all your mana. Now you're able to protect the walker with your spells, your creatures. So I think that is relevant. Standard only, but I do think that is relevant. Chapter 1 is kind of hard to activate again, but you know. And also, if the board's already empty, you can play this on Chapter 2. And then in very small scenarios where a walker is about to ultimate, if you want, you can plus it and then play it again and ultimate it. Not the best white card, but I do think people are sleeping on this one. Next up, we're going to blue. This is the best blue card for Standard though. With hottiejim. What does hottie mean? It means it's very hot. Okay, seriously no. All right, this is a 3 mana star 4, right? And its power and toughness, or its power is equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. This is very much like Enigma Drake, but on top of that, it makes all your instant sorceries cost one less. This is huge. Like makes your counter spells cheaper, your card draws cheaper, and it's just a very nice threat that you want to play in your Izzet or blue instant and sorcery deck. Very good card. Will be a staple for Standard for sure. This next one is Joint Exploration. It's for 2 mana. You get to scry 2 and draw a card. Then if you kick it, you can put a land from hand into play. Why I like this card is because it's like Preordain, or Omen of the Sea. I guess more like Omen of the Sea because it costs 2 mana and instant speed, which is again similar to Omen. Omen is also permanent though. But the plus side of this is you're able to kick it and put it into play. And that's nice. And land you put into play is untapped. which is relevant because at that point, if you put it in play untapped, it's kind of like a growth spiral type deal. But even late game, having this type of effect, the Omen effect, Omen of the Sea effect, is nice. I like this card. It's not as powerful as growth spiral, but I do like it. I'm a fan. I do think it will see some play somewhere. If blue green is normally playable, like a ramp strategy, this could definitely see play in that deck, or even like a control deck, the splashing green. This could see play there too, as like a Omen of the Sea with a ramp attached to it if you want it. So this next one is Leona's Vortex. It's basically an unsummon for a creature or a planeswalker. Not being able to hit your own things is a drawback, but I do think being able to deal with a planeswalker for 1 mana, even if it's temporary, is good enough for tempo decks. And then later in the game, you can pay 4 mana for a removal spell. It's like like a Vrasa's Contempt type deal. If it's kicked, it goes on the bottom. So like it does kill the creature. It exiles it, which is, like Vrasa's Contempt was played. I'm not saying like there's no life gain, right? But this is still a pretty nice unsummon. It's not great. It's not the best one, but I do think it will see play just because they look at planeswalkers and because it has the kicker ability to get rid of the threat, not permanently, but for a while. Probably for the rest of the game, right? So, I do like this one. It's pretty good. And the next one is more so for not standard but older formats. It is a Merfolk Lord, 2 mana, 1/1 flash, small body, but it's a 2 mana Lord. Which I know we have Merfolk of Atlantis and stuff, but this thing turns your creatures into like mini force spikes for non-creature spells, right? And usually you want to overwhelm, like you want your Merfolks, your fish deck to have a bunch of creatures, and then usually you're forced to play like 1 or 2 spell pierces or miscast or some way to counter a spell. But with this one, you don't necessarily have to. Like everything becomes like a mini curse catcher, and it's the Lord itself. I think it's pretty nice for 2 mana. It allows you to like. You may be like, it's a hefty cost, but sacrificing 2 creatures instead of like your whole board to counter a board wipe is very nice. It also has flash, so you can flash it in for surprise attacks or blocks. So I am a fan of this. I am a fan of the Hex Hatcher for sure. All right, and this last one is an oddball, Founding the Third Path. It is a enchantment saga with read ahead. Chapter 1 allows you to cast an instant sorcery spell with mana value 1 or 2. So basically pays for itself. Second chapter is it mills 4 cards. That's okay. It's not too great. It's not great actually. You probably win yourself. And then chapter 3, you're able to then play a card, right? So it's like it's nice if this is nice in like a deck with something like Dreadhorde Arcanist. Or if you're trying to activate prowess, right? This is double prowess triggers, which I do like. Again, filling a graveyard up is good if you have flashback cards, things like Reckless Rage or flashing back with Arcanist. In the last chapter, be able to cast another spell is nice. It's not crazy, but I do think this is worth mentioning over like basically cancel number 20. Like there's a cancel this format or in the set where it can cost 1 blue less if a player has 2 more spells. Is that card playable? Sure, maybe cancel variation number 20. But I think it's worth mentioning this card. I do like it. I think it could see play in prowess decks for sure. Things that are trying to trigger that effect twice. It's also nice for to fuel the graveyard for like other creatures too, so I like it. Moving on to black. Braids Arisen Nightmare. So Braids is back, which is kind of cool. And this card has a lot of text, but I do think it's nice. So this card says, at the beginning of the end step, you may sack an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent card type with it. Each opponent who doesn't, at least 2 life, and you draw a card. Now, obviously, you can like pressure them by sacking a land, right? No one's gonna want to sack a land, but that's not the card is what really comes in. It comes in like when you're able to play something like Blood Tithe Harvester. You have treasures, you have blood tokens, you have those tokens against other decks, control decks, or just decks that aren't sack decks. You're able to sacrifice this blood token now to draw a card, and drain the opponent. Right? It's like a mini priest of Forgotten Rites or priest of Fell Rites. Tap one. Regardless, this adds up pretty quickly, and it triggers at your instep, not on your upkeep. So it's going to trigger essentially that turn, unless they kill it immediately. I think that this is a very good for sack decks. It also works. I think it works nice and plays well with the Oni Cult Envol decks as well. So Braids gets a thumbs up from me. Our next one is Cutdown, and this one is great for standard play. Right, instant destroy a creature with total power toughness 5 or less. This is our fatal push for standard. However, this is a card that, like, again, is great for standard, but when you take it over to modern or pioneer or whatever, it loses value because fatal push is so much stronger. Fatal push is able to kill things like Termagoyf or like just Kalidas, and just a lot, like fatal push is way more versatile, especially if you're able to trigger revolt with fetches or blood tokens or whatever. But this is a very nice spell for standard. Allows control decks, mid-range decks to keep up with aggro. I do like it in that aspect. It's good there. But it's perfect example of like top 5 cards in the set, but just not for every format. Drag to the bottom. This is for the bottoms out there. All the bottoms rise up. It says domain. Each player gets -X on a turn, where X is X+1. X plus the number of basic land types my lands you control. Originally, I wasn't sold on this card. Then I realized it's +1. So let's say if you're playing a 3-color deck, this is just automatically languish, right? Just because the Triumph gives you 3 types, and you have the +1 added. It's just languish. And then from there, it's just higher. It's 5 and 6 total. I like it. I think it's a solid removal spell that can get bigger if you're playing like 5-color deck. Yeah, it's just a languish with upside and sometimes downside. You know, sometimes it will be just -2/-2 if you don't find the Triumph, if you're choked on mana, colors. But at that point too, if you're choked on colors, it's gonna suck either way. I'm still like iffy on it because you have to have land types, right? So if you're playing the slow lands, those don't count. Definitely these Triumphs. But I do think it's playable. Especially mostly just for standard, but it's playable there. But it competes with the Meathook Massacre, so it's iffy. Like you have to decide between this and Meathook. I think if you are reliably like a multicolored deck with multiple Triumphs, this one's good. If you are like a big mana deck or a mid-range deck, Meathook might be better if you want to play like lands from Crimson Vow and stuff in Midnight Hunt, the slow lands, or even the pain lands from this set. Evolved Sleeper is my sleeper of the set. Aha, no. It's not really a sleeper. It's just it's a good card. It fills the curve for any black mid-range / aggro deck. It's a 1/1. You pay 1 mana. Comes a 2/2. Then it changes creature types. Then after it's a cleric, you pay 2 mana. Becomes a Phyrexian. Then you pay 3 mana, and with the Phyrexian, you put a counter on it. Then you draw a card and you lose 1 life. And it's important to note that this is like repeatable, right? So eventually, like opponent's gonna have to deal with this, or you're gonna be drawing cards. This is just a very good card, excellent in all sorts of mid-range aggro black X decks. I like it. I'm a fan of it. It's also a human, which is a very relevant creature type. So thumbs up to Evolved Sleeper. And this one, the big one, Liliana of the Veil, right? This is the card that everyone's wondering about. How powerful is this card? Obviously, it's great for Pioneer, for the black red mid range deck. It's okay in older formats. Modern doesn't see play anymore really. Modern has gone past Leona. We're way past Leona as far as how strong she is. Leona was very strong when I was playing Magic 10 years ago or 9 years ago. Whenever she first came out, she was really good too because there was cards like Geist of Saint Traft, and she would deal with hexproof creatures, which was nice. But nowadays, it's kind of rough, man. Like coming down Edict and then discarding card is the best option. Like you really want to be able to play this and kill the own creature on curve. If you play this and plus you're using 2 cards to discard a card and make an opponent discard a card. This card disadvantage technically. This card will be good if in standard, if you're using your graveyard, if you have flashback cards. There's no flashback type cards yet, which makes me think a little more weary on it. Like Leona shined in old standard because of things like Forbidden Alchemy or Lingering Souls. You know, you had like you had sweet cards to flash back or even reanimate, and that's where when your graveyard is extension of your hand, that's where you want this card. Control does not want this card unless you're again reanimating. Mid range doesn't really want this card either unless you're like also trying to utilize the graveyard, because Magic now is built so the fire design is like everything does something right now. Everything makes card advantage, right? And it's hard to attrition them out with Leon the Veil, which is why Jund has fallen out of favor, you know, since forever. This card it'll see play in standard absolutely, but it is not like end all be all of all planeswalkers. All right, moving on to red. We have the Horde Master, 2 mana, 1/1. Other goblin +1/+1. And it says whenever this creature or another goblin you control dies, exile top card of your library. If it's a goblin, goblin creature card, you may cast that card till the end of your next turn. This is nice too. This is nice because it works. One, it's just like an anti-board wipe. If your opponent wipes your board, you exile top card of your library, and it's also a Lord, fantastic card. And on top of that, like it works very well with Skirk Prospector. You're able to sacrifice your goblin, you get mana, you're able to exile top card of your library, and then play if you need to. It's just and on top of all that's Lord. The worst thing about it is it's small. It's not 2/2, but I think it makes up for being a 2 mana Lord that also protects your board. It's also nice because like even if you play this and your opponent kills it, you could exile a goblin, and then next turn you just play the goblin that you exiled, right? Nice card. It's very good for goblins. Not good for standard. Not enough goblin standard, but older formats for sure. All right, electrostatic infantry. This is kind of inconspicuous. Maybe a little surprises on here, but it is a 2 mana 1/2 trample, and it says whenever you cast instant sorcery spell, put a counter on this. It's counter. It's not prowess. It's only instant sorcery. This is basically like a sprite dragon that grows with trample. It's powerful, and sure it doesn't have flying, but in some cases trample can be better than flying, especially if you get this thing to be massive. I like this card. Great for the prowess decks. It's a wizard too, which is relevant for some of these decks. So also good in like feather type heroic decks. So great card. I don't usually play these decks, but this is definitely a card I can recognize that has potential in those type of is it type decks. Holy Diva. Go ask Holy Diva how good this card is. She'll probably tell you it's good. She'll probably play it at some point. Jaya, Fire Negotiator. This is a 4 mana walker with 4 abilities. Sweet. Her +1 makes a prowess token. Speaking of prowess, So kind of protects itself in that way, making tokens and blocking. Her -1 is card advantage, exile top 2 cards of your library, and you're able to play one of them. And her -2 is an awkward removal spell where it pings a creature, planeswalker, when creatures attack. And our -8, okay, remember what it does, I know it's when you win. Whenever you cast a red or destroy spell, copy it twice. Sure, you win the game. So this card is very, I think this card is great and very good in Standard. We'll see play. I don't think it's great in older formats where you have Chandra, Torch of Defiance. This is where, again, this is a great, why I'm saying this is a top 5 card, probably close to unplayable in older formats, but very, very good in Standard. A creature that makes bodies, can make card advantage, and can be removal situationally, all of the 3 abilities. And on top of that, she has an ultimate. Like, yeah, this card's sweet. Sweet card. Our next one is Squee, Dubious Monarch. Squee's a 2-mana 2/2 haste. Whenever he attacks, you make a 1/1 red goblin, tap and attacking. Kind of reminds me of like a Legion War Boss or Goblin Horde Master, but a little bit worse than those cards in some ways. Or because the goblin isn't made unless Squee attacks. Squee has to attack in order to make the goblin. So this is very good, say, against like decks that are playing not many creatures. So very good versus like control decks. And then on top of that, it does have escape, which is not really, it's not called escape, but it's basically escape. You can cast it by paying 4 mana and exiling 4 of the cards, and he comes into play. He's a good card. It really depends on how the format shapes up. If it's very mid-rangey, if we're very mid-rangey, then like Squeeze going to struggle a bit, or you may see him in the sideboard for control decks because he is good versus control and he is resilient versus control because of the escape ability. Just be careful though, because there's a lot of exile effects in Standard. So Wandering Emperor, Otherworldly Journey, or the Otherworldly Lights, the white X one. So and prismatic endings soon too. Our next one is Temporal Firestorm. This is a basically a burn down the house. You cast it, it does 5 damage to each creature in each planeswalker. And you can kick it for 1 to blue or 1 to white. And if you do, you're able to phase out things. This is situational, but it is good enough for Standard, especially in control decks where you want to keep Planeswalker alive. 7 is a lot of mana, but if you're paying 7 mana and you're saving a Planeswalker and wiping the board, that is you're winning the game. Like, you're doing so much there. It's very strong. But mostly this would just be a wrath. But the upside is nice for control decks or just control decks that want to play Planeswalkers. I like it there, especially if we are getting Teferi, Slow the Sunset alongside like Lotus or whatever. So use a lot of mana. All right, move on to green. If you noticed, we've talked about no defilers so far, and that's because I don't think any of them are quite good enough for Standard. I do think that this one could be, only because its ability, whenever you cast a green permanent spell, it puts counters on everything, not just itself. So this is a 5-mana trample, 6/6. And honestly, usually that's not good enough anymore because it has no ETB ability. Compare this to Elder Gargaroth. Gargaroth saw fringe play. He sees play here and there. It's a good card. But Defiler doesn't have vigilance or an ability when it attacks or blocks. But it does have that friction ability where it says you can pay 2 life instead of paying a green pip to reduce the cost of the green spells. And that makes me think it might be playable, or could be very playable with this other green card that I'll talk about here in a second. I do like this card though. It lets you spread your hand. Maybe you want it in Green Devotion. You could try it to like play even more spells at a faster pace. So definitely like a way to reduce cost of your spells and just grow your team massively. Like the ability to just grow everything with counters is huge. And green tends to have a lot of devotion type cards, right? Like you have the Werewolf Pack Leader. You have Old Growth Troll. You have Cavalier Thorns. You have this new one coming up we'll talk about here in a second. So Leaf Crown Visionary. The 2 mana 1/1. Has other elves you control get +1. It's an elf itself. It's an elf lord for 2 mana, which is okay. We've seen that before, but it really shines with the last ability. It says whenever you cast an elf spell, you can pay a green if you do draw a card. That's huge for elves. Elves usually has so much freaking mana that it doesn't do with it. That this is a nice lord / payoff. It's like a lord mixed with the glimpse. The green glimpse of nature, I believe. Very welcome addition to green decks. You can hit it with Coco. No longer do you have to play the 4 mana 2/3 Beast Whisperer. So very good, very good elf. This next one is Leona Green Widow. I like this for standard. It is one of the better 3-drops for the mid-range / aggro green decks. It's a 4 mana 4/3 with reach and trample, which is already pretty good. That's pretty great, right? Like green struggled so much versus things like Goldspan Dragon, or things that fly. Now despite of this, like it's good on offense and it's good on defense because it has reach and has 4 power. And the last ability says you can return this card from the graveyard to the battlefield, tapped. If you pay 8 mana, and then if it would die, you exile it. And this costs 1 less to cast for each basic type you control. Even if this is just reduced to like 1 or 2 or 3, this card is still good. 8 mana is obviously a lot to escape it, but 6 mana, 5 mana, it's pretty good. And just on its face, I do like it. Overall, I think it's worth some. Overall, I do think it's worth some Old Growth Troll, but it is a little bit different enough where you have like the reach, which matters for it. And this is the card I was talking about for the Defiler, the Green Defiler. So we had Defiler Vigor, right, which makes the Phyrexians, gives you Phyrexian mana. Oops, for green. And I like that because it kind of plays well with the Silverback Elder. And the reason it plays well with this card is because it's a 5 mana 5/7, which honestly isn't good enough. Like I know those are huge stats, but that itself is not good enough. But it says when you cast a creature spell, you can choose one. You gain 4 life, you destroy an artifact or enchantment, or you can top 5 cards in your library, put a land card on the battlefield tapped. And what this does is it kind of offsets the life that you're going to be using for the Defiler. Because now essentially it says like, you know, all your green creature spells cost 2 green less or more, depending on how much you want to pay, how much you want to gain life. And I think these 2 cards can work in conjunction. Outside of that, if Defiler is bad, this card's unplayable. I don't think this card's actually very good by itself by any means. Green, I think, struggled for a bit for top 5 cards in the set. This card's obviously very good in Commander and whatnot. Or maybe like a format where you're playing a lot of creatures and you want to bring in for destroy artifacts and enchantments from the sideboard. But in standard, 5 mana for 5/7 has a lot of text, but again, man, Magic these days is a creature does a lot. Creature does a lot, and this one is doing a lot, but not fast enough. It's too slow overall. But it does work well with the Defiler, which I wanted to mention. I think that's relevant for standard. And next one is a staple in standard for as long as legal. This card is great. It's 2 mana 1/3. That mana creature that adds 1 mana of any color. And then later in the game or whenever you want, you can tap it to give a land haste and make it 3/3. Play on turn, so you can attack. It being a 1/3 is huge. Allows you to block 2/1s. That's very relevant. It dodges things like shock effects. You can't kill it with Voltaic Surge unless you like, you know, sacrifice an artifact. It's a mana dork. We'll see play. It's great. It ramps you. It can be aggressive later in the game. I do like it. I like it. Now on to the multicolored. We have a Ajani Sleeper Agent. Or Ajani. He got completed. Just like Tamio. So Ajani costs 4 mana, but you can pay 2 life less to make him 3 mana. If you do, he comes into play with 2 less loyalty, which means you cannot activate his second ability. So what does Ajani do? When he comes into play, you can the top cover of your library. You pay +1. The top cover of your library if it's a creature or planeswalker, you put in your hand. He's -3, he distributes 3 counters, and then those creatures get vigilance until end of turn. So that way, he does like protect himself on turn 4. If you have that, and it's -6. You can unblow whenever you cast a creature or planeswalker. Target opponent, target player gets 2 poison counters, which win the game after you cast 5 more creature spells. So this card reminds me a lot of Dominaria Raid. If you remember, Dominaria Raid is a 3 mana planeswalker that just is. It was nice to have a different threat or card for the deck that is very heavy on creatures. You're gonna want to be very, very heavy on creatures to play this card. Like you're gonna want a lot of creatures. This is just a nice way to refuel your hand, keep going after Wrath, and threaten the opponent with an ultimate against control. This is much less a card for control decks and more for decks that are heavy with creatures. So that's where I see Ajani being played. Standard. This next one is it's kind of a freebie. It's 2 mana 2/2 that touch. It says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. This card it has that touch. This card's great. The only bad thing about this card is it's legendary. So this goes in the cleric decks. Of course, you probably don't want to play 4 of them, but it is nice that it itself has death touch and gives you that cleric life loss death ability. So that's this card. That's what this card suits you play. It just sucks that it's legendary for those decks, but has that touch too, so it's a nice way to trade up against those big green decks or other mid-range decks. Next up, we have Nemita, the Primeval Warden. This card is 4 mana for a 3/4 with reach. It says if a creature in opponent control would die, exile instead. When you do, you make one more sapperling. You can sacrifice a sapperling, and then give this thing +2/+2 on turn. Or you can pay 2, sacrifice a sapperling, and draw a card. This is very much like has a lot of Cletus Trader of Get vibes, which Cletus was great, phenomenal in like mid-range control decks alike. While this one isn't as good as Cletus, it makes 1/1s, has reach to lifelink. I still think it's good enough because it stops death triggers. It makes bodies, and with those bodies you can draw cards. And even and Cletus got bigger permanently. When Cletus hit a zombie, you got counters. This doesn't get counters, but again, not as good as Cletus, but still playable in my opinion. Just a great mid-range card. All right, here's another one. Airtight Resurrected. I think there's debate on this one whether it's good or not. So 4 mana, flash, 3/2. This thing on his battlefield says counter a spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. His controller draws a card. Or he can destroy a creature or a planeswalker, and then his controller draws a card. Now, nobody wants the opponent or player. Nobody wants the opponent to draw a card with your own cards, right? I get that. I completely understand it. But sometimes it's necessary, and things like Vendilion Click that when it came to play, loot opponent's hand, put a card on the bottom, they still drew a card, right? Unlike Vendilion Click, though, the card that you're hitting with this card is a card that they've already played, like they've already invested mana into, right? So it's not like it's at least you're basically tempoing them out as well. And unlike things like Obscura, Interceptor, and Field Mystic, which are hard to cast, like they're both pure to cast, This one doesn't care when you draw it. It doesn't care like, because the other ones counter spells, right? Well, if this one can counter the spell, then at least you can kill the threat. And on top of that, you can kill your own thing. If your opponent is like alpha striking your planeswalker, you can play this, kill your planeswalker, and draw a card as well, and then block a creature. So I like this card. I do think it's good. I think it's a nice option for control decks. I don't think it's the 4 of. I think you play like a couple of them, like 1 or 2, but I do like having that versatility and control to kill my own thing if I need to draw a card, or to kill my opponent's like land or planeswalker or whatever, or even counter spell. That's a lot of versatility in one card with flash, and I like that. I like that a lot personally for control decks, or even mid range decks. This next one is a Jund card, Soul of Windgrace. This is my favorite multicolored card. I'm actually excited to play this card. I want to brew with it now. It's obviously a sweet commander card too. This card just really gets me going. It's 4 mana for a 5/4. It says when this thing enters the battlefield or attacks, you can put a land from a graveyard onto the battlefield, tapped under your control. Now keep in mind this says a land from a graveyard. It doesn't have to be yours. It can be your opponent's. It could be your other opponent if you're playing commander. It can be from anywhere. And then he basically ramps you. And he has another ability that says, discard a land card, you gain 3 life for 1 green, or pay 2 red, discard a land, draw a card, or 3, discard a land card, tap him, and he becomes indestructible. Well, that's kind of hefty. It is nice though, because then at this point basically you're like discarding land card, you can attack, you gain 3 life, and you're able to accrue card advantage that way too if you draw a card. Excuse me. Because you're able to put your lands and still ramp, which is super nice. Obviously, there's no like failed passage or fetch lands in standard, but I do think what you do for this deck is you play some of those evolving wilds, or even those cabaret, whatever the lands, because I don't play them, but the lands that come into play. They come into play, you sacrifice them, you gain a life, and you get a basic land, essentially. You want to balance it so that you have a couple of those in your deck. That way, when you play Soul of Windgrace, you're able to, for sure, ramp a bit. But you want to make it so that you don't play a lot of those lands. So there's going to be some sort of number, maybe like, it's like 6-ish, or maybe less, maybe a little more. It depends on easy waffles. It depends on how many Windgraces you play, right? If you play 2 Windgrace, you can probably get away with like 4 of those lands as well. And that's nice because you're able to ramp with them, and then he'll always have a target to hit as with when he attacks. So I like this card. I think it's sweet. Obviously, it's designed for commander, but I'm excited to play with I'm excited to play with it for standard. So. All right, on to Carless. The Carless stuff. Golden Gussy. 4 mana for a 3/6 legendary vehicle artifact. This says when this thing attacks, exile each creature that crewed it this turn and return this creature's battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. And it's crew 1. Even though it's crew 1, multiple things can crew the boat and attack. We have to keep in mind that, like, I picked this card because there aren't that many Carless cards in general. I actually don't think this card's great. I think it's fun, but the artifacts such Carless cards are we don't have many. But comparing this to something like Teleportation Circle wasn't really played. No, I mean it's a fun card though. Like you can play in Commander or in a casual deck, but the Gussy I feel like is more convoluted. Circle, teleportation circle. Sure, it can exile multiple things at once, like a Yorion, which I do like. But it has to attack, which is kind of annoying. Like you have to crew it and attack, and it has to live for you to do it again next turn, right? Which I think is a problem. I think that's too many hoops personally, especially if teleportation circle saw no play. Still a fun card though, and definitely top 5 artifacts because there's not that many artifacts or colorless cards in this that are in this set. Here we go, Karn, Living Legacy. Karn's getting a lot of flack, rightfully so. He reads weird, and he's definitely the worst Karn of the 4 we've seen. He's worse than Karn Liberated. He's worse than Karn the Great Creator. Worse than Karn Silver Golem. But I do honestly think this card can be playable, especially the more artifact cards we see going forward. So he's 4 mana for Lotus Planeswalker. You +1 him. He makes a tapped Power Stone, which can only be used to activate. Sorry, can only be used to cast artifact or activate abilities. You can't use it to cast non-artifact spells. And then his -1 is you pay X mana, -1. Look at top X cards of your library, put in your hand. So these do work with the Power Stone shards. And then his -7 is a game winner. It makes all your artifacts able to tap and deal 1 damage to any target, which is clearly very good and very powerful. But I still think he's alright, especially if artifacts end up mattering, which I find it hard that artifacts won't matter, because we have like the Brothers' War, we have the Friction stuff coming up. And even without that, I think he's like, obviously you want some sort of artifact things to cast with Power Stones. You don't want just Power Stones laying around. But keep in mind too, the Power Stones do work for non-spells, like for animating your creature land, or for a planeswalker ability like his, or even something for like Celestis or a creature ability, like for Windgrace or whatever. I don't think he's obviously again he's worse than all the other Karns, but I think we are judging him harshly because all of the Karns are format staples in multiple formats, right? The Great Creator is played in Modern. Silver Golem is played in older formats too, and Karn Liberated is also played in like Tron. So this one doesn't make the cut. I think does not make the cut in older formats, but it's still colorless and might make the cut for Standard, especially as time goes on for Standard. Again, keep in mind, colorless cards are a bit low reaching here, but this makes top 5 for me. And this is the Relic of Legends, 3 mana artifact. It says tap, add 1 mana of any color, and you can also tap untap legendary creature you control, add 1 mana of any color. Only reason being is because this card I think is very good in the Kinnan Prodigy and the Emery combo deck, right? I don't think you play a lot of these. You probably play like 1, but the fact that you can tap Kinnan for 2 mana, you can tap Emery for mana as soon as it comes into play, it's because it just doesn't care if it's sick or not. You can do it immediately, and Emery can mill this card and let you play it as well. Again, it's not crazy, but being able to tap your Kinnan for mana does matter. And if the deck that, man, I wish I knew this name. I should know this name. The Abzan card. The one that makes your legend spells cost 1 less. You can exile 2 legends from your graveyard and cast legend spells. It's like a scribe thing. I'm so sorry. I should know this. If that deck becomes popular, this could potentially see play in that deck, because that deck is also like 4 colors and it has a lot of legends. So that could see play. Being able to tap your Absent creature mana, I think is relevant too. So again, low reaching fruit here for color stuff. All right, my number one pick for artifacts, easily my favorite card. One of my favorite cards, probably my favorite card in the set. Timeless Lotus, 5 mana, comes with tapped. You can tap it for the Rainbow. Now, this card, 5 mana is a lot. This is more than Gilded Lotus. Gilded Lotus can run play untapped, for sure. Adds 3 mana, which is super nice right away. This adds 5 mana. 5 is a lot. It's an astronomical amount. It's like playing a colorless Mirari's Wake, right? You're doubling your mana. Next turn, you're going from 5 mana to 10 or 11 mana next turn. If you have ways to untap this, like Karn and Modern can untap with Cura. In Standard, we have Teferi. So basically, you can play Teferi who slows the sunset. You can play Timeless Lotus. So on turn 5, you play Timeless Lotus, tap out. If you plus Teferi, you can untap Timeless Lotus and land. So you have 6 mana, and then play like the Kami War. So I'm working on it, okay? 5 color, Teferi, Slow the Sunset, Timeless Lotus deck. I'm working on it. Give me a second. Probably one of the cards I'll brew around first. Super cool. I like it. It's a ramp card. And it's a Lotus. Like, how can you not like a Lotus, right? Alright, the last colorless cards are going to be the Pain Lands. I'm not going to go through all of them. They're all good. These cards are all good, all playable in Standard. However, just keep in mind though, these cards are much better for aggro decks because they can afford life loss. Control decks don't really want this ability. They'd rather play the slow lands. And control doesn't want to usually lose life. Control decks in the past have played like 1 or 2 of these sometimes, but it feels so bad to like play 4, and then that one game you're stuck using these lands forever. And you lose like 6 life to yourself. It just feels bad. I'm not a fan of these lands because I usually like to play decks that would rather play lands that don't hurt you. I wish we got the fast land instead, like Carpeline Gorge or Darklick Shores instead of these, because those work for control decks and for aggro decks. But these pain lands really hurt the slower decks that trying to go to later game. But they're nice for aggro. We also can keep in mind for aggro if you're playing like the Boros, if you're playing these lands for an aggro deck, you gotta be careful because you don't play too many. Because we also have the gate one, which is really bad, like the bad city of brass. But it does allow you to play 3-color decks in your aggressive deck. But be careful because it makes you worse against aggro. Like if you're playing an aggro deck with these pain lands, and you pair it against control, you don't usually care how much life you lose, because right? Because control isn't really pressuring your life total. But if you're playing another aggro deck or a burn deck, these will add up really quickly. You'll see it. So yeah, that is it. That is it for Dominaria United. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for hanging out. I do appreciate y'all. If you're buying these cards, if you're shopping, please shop at coolstuffinc.com. Support me, support Cool Stuff Inc. Use code OLLIE5. 5% off your entire order. Get a free token, with token. I'll also be streaming live on Twitch this Wednesday, which is going to be, let me double check. I think it's before September 1st. It will be 31st, August 31st. So about this goes live, I should be streaming live. I'm gonna do a 12-hour stream. If you want to see my brews or decks, you see some here on coolstuffinc.com, or you can go to my channel, youtube.com/Aintrazi. See a bunch there. All right, cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate y'all. Hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think down below, like what cards I missed that you like. Yeah, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, night, day, wherever you are. And yeah, peace out.